Right, you guys, got another video here for you. In this one we're taking a look at the black screen of death. As you can see here, we have a black screen and we have a computer that is running on the system, and we're going to be taking a look at how to quickly troubleshoot this problem. Now there's a couple of reasons why you get a black screen like this. There's one with no signal, and you'll also get one where the PC is completely dead, and you would have to then troubleshoot hardware inside here. But we'll go through some of these procedures on how to quickly resolve a black screen like this one. So the first thing you want to try is to make sure that the HDMI cable is plugged into the actual graphics card. If you have a graphics card in here, it will be on this slot here, and this is where you need to make sure the HDMI cable or the DP cable, display port cable, is plugged into one of these ports here. If it's not, just make sure you plug it in. What a common problem is, what people do is they plug it into one of these ports up here, which is this one here, and this will then use onboard graphics. And the problem with that is that can cause problems, especially if your CPU doesn't have onboard graphics and you're trying to plug it in here and get a display. And there is a HDMI port on here which sometimes people plug it into like this, so you don't want to do that because you're not going to get any display. So try and plug it straight in directly to the graphics card itself here. So now we've got it plugged into the back of the GPU here. There could be a problem with the GPU. There can also be a problem with the graphics card driver, and we need to check that as well. And we need to check both of those things. The next thing you want to do is check your monitor cable, which is your HDMI cable. Make sure this is a known good cable, that it's working correctly. If you have another one, swap it out and try a new one. Also make sure you've got power to your monitor, and make sure that the back of the monitor has the cable plugged into it. You can plug this straight into a TV to make sure you get display. This means that your monitor may have failed and you may have had a bad monitor. So check the back of the monitor, make sure you got power, make sure that you've got your HDMI cable plugged in here. Okay, and swap this out just to test. Now never assume that your cable is good, the monitor is good. On all these things you need to test. Okay, that is the only way you're going to know 100% whether something has blown or packed up or failed. Okay, another thing you want to make sure is see if there's any LED lights showing up on the actual monitor. Now before we look inside the computer, if you have any external drives or anything like this plugged in to the back of the computer, always remove these and then try again and then see whether this fixes the problem. Having any sort of devices plugged in like hard drives and things like that can cause an issue. So you want to go back to basics basically. So what we're going to do next before we go inside is just make sure that we take out all of the power cable. You can turn it off here first if you wish. Just make sure you turn this back on. And we're just going to unplug this cable here. You can leave the HDMI cable plugged in. We're going to go inside the case now. Okay, so let's go inside and have a quick look here before we go into safe mode and try to have a look at the driver issue in case it's a driver related issue. But first I just want to cover some of the basics here. So let's start off with the cables. So your GPU cable is this one here plugged into the graphics card. Make sure that is plugged in. Another thing you can try is if this cable is an extension cable like this one, then you may want to remove the extension cable. Make sure it's plugged in at the back of the case here. When you take the case out, these will be going through the bottom and out the back and plugged into the power supply cable, which goes to your power supply. Sometimes it's worth unplugging this and plugging the cable directly from the power supply into here to make sure that this extension cable has not failed. It's possible that it might not be working, especially if it's a brand new build or something like that. It's worth checking. Let's move on to the next bit, which is your power supply. Sometimes having a power supply that isn't powerful enough to drive the graphics card that you have can cause issues. And I've seen it having black screens before where the power supply is not powerful enough to drive the GPU. It's not so much of a problem today in 2021, but as you can see here, this is a 500 watt power supply and this is a RX 580 in here. So probably that, I would say, that's probably about at its limit there. 600 would have been better for this, really, but it's not so much of an issue for this not to work. So check those things. Now also your power supply could be intermittent faults and could be causing an issue, and you need to check this or swap it out with a known good power supply. Also removing the graphics card, making sure it's seated correctly. I've seen this issues as well where they haven't seated the graphics card into the board properly. Just try that and make sure that that is seated correctly. We are going to reset the CMOS battery, which is underneath this GPU on the board, and we need to take this out and reseat it. Don't just assume it's reseated, take it out and reseat it. Same thing for your memory. Make sure that this is seated properly all the way in to the slot. And we'll get on to checking your memory and stuff later on, but we'll move on to the GPU and take this out. Okay, so we've removed the GPU here. As you can see, we've just taken this out. And what we're going to do is make sure we reinsert it back into the slot properly. Now also what you can do while you've got the GPU out is you can pull out the CMOS and reset the CMOS by taking out the battery. Now there is a jumper on here which you can clear the CMOS, but I'm going to keep this nice and simple for you guys because obviously some people might not be experienced enough to do that. So I'm going to show you basically just pull this little battery out here, and if you can't get your finger on it to remove the battery itself, then you can use a little screwdriver to pop this out. Okay, so let's just pop the CMOS battery out here. Now you can test this if you want to, or if it's an old PC you may want to replace this because sometimes these can fail, and if this fails then your PC might not boot properly. So you need to check this CMOS battery, it's very important. Okay, so now we've got the CMOS battery out, we've got the power cable removed from the back of the computer, so there's no power in the computer at all. You want to hold your power button down up the top on the case here. Just hold that down for 30 seconds and this will clear any power that you have in the computer that gets stored. And you want to make sure that there's no power in there. And this will clear the CMOS. Now you can leave this for like 30 seconds just to make sure that has cleared all the power. You sometimes see lights flash and that goes off. Just like when you turn your TV off, the light still stays on for a little while. And that's power that's stored in the computer or in the TV or whatever it is device that you're powering off. Once you've held that for 30 seconds, you can then replace the battery in like so. Now what you can do if you want to test to see whether your GPU has failed, if you don't have another GPU but you do have a processor that has onboard graphics, a lot of the Intel ones do have onboard graphics, you can use those and test to see whether it's the actual GPU that's failed. So all you need to do is go around the back again, just like I showed you before, and right here you'll see HDMI. Now if your CPU does have onboard graphics, you can try to put your HDMI cable in here and boot to onboard graphics. If you get display and you get some sort of power coming on, then your GPU could be failed. But what you can do is boot there and see whether you get display. If you get display, it's a good thing. Now if you don't have onboard graphics and you can't use this method and you want to know whether your GPU has failed, now if you haven't got a GPU lying around, then you're going to have to obviously get one to test. Now you can either ask a friend if you can just borrow his GPU to put it in to test, but if that's not the case and you can't do that, then what you'll need to do is get yourself a GPU. You don't need an expensive one to test. You can buy yourself one that doesn't require any power, something like a 710 along those lines, and basically plug it in here, and you can pick those up for like £30 on Amazon. Give it a test to see whether it works. If it works, you know your GPU is fouled. So that is a quick and easy way to test. Swapping out is the most easiest way to test for bad GPUs. Now while you're here, you can reseat the RAM. Just make sure, just take the RAM out to make sure that you reseat it properly. Make sure it's in the right channel. You can try one stick at a time and try again. So just reseat your RAM and make sure that's seated properly. And you should hear a little click. Okay, so let's quickly talk about troubleshooting and how you can quickly troubleshoot stuff. The quickest way to troubleshoot is to swap things out. That's the easiest way to find out what is failing. So for instance, if your computer keeps crashing when you play games, the best thing to do is swap out a part that you think is causing the issue and then try to play that game again. If it doesn't crash, then it's more than likely the part that you just swapped out. Quick, easy diagnosis. So for instance, if we have an issue when we're doing something and we swap out the RAM with one known good stick of RAM, what we have already, and we put it in place of these two, and the problem goes away, then we know it's one of these sticks of RAM that's causing the issue. Same thing for your power supply. Power supply intermittent issues are probably the hardest to troubleshoot. They can hide behind a working power supply, but they only sort of fail when you do certain things, and I've seen this before. But swapping this out with a known good power supply is the quickest way to test. So for instance, if you're playing games, it's crashing, and you replace the power supply, and it doesn't crash anymore, it's your power supply. There's no rocket science behind it. You don't need any sort of difficult troubleshooting techniques that you need to try. It's pretty straightforward stuff. The only thing is, if you're not a PC repair shop or a guy that has a lot of hardware around, then it's going to be a bit more troublesome for you because you don't have power supplies, RAM and GPUs and things like that to test. It doesn't cost a lot to get some of the cheaper parts. You only need a cheap GPU, a cheaper power supply and a stick of known good RAM, and you're pretty much good to start troubleshooting problems. But we're going to boot into safe mode now. If you can't see a display on your monitor screen, then you need to get yourself a bootable USB media with Windows 10 on it, or Windows 11 if you're using that, or Windows 7 or whatever it is that you're using, and boot to that USB media so we can then get into safe mode to uninstall the GPU driver that may be causing the issue. Obviously you can't boot into normal desktop because you can't see a display. So let's go ahead and try and do that.
Now, if you've got a driver issue and you want to try to rectify that by uninstalling the GPU driver, then you need to get into safe mode to remove that driver. And you can do that by booting up the PC and boot into a USB flash drive with Windows 10 on it, or Windows 11, or whatever version of Windows you've got. You may also have a recovery drive which you created, which you can also boot up to get into safe mode. Now, of course, this is all assuming that you can still see your screen, and it does pop up with some sort of information on the screen here. If you've got a completely black screen and your maybe your monitor has died or a cable's bad, you're not going to be able to get a display. You can see there's something happening here, and I can now see press F1 to boot into the BIOS. So I'm going to go ahead and press F1 to boot into the BIOS, and this is because we reset the BIOS by taking out the battery. So I'm going to do that and push F1. We now have access to the BIOS, and what I'm going to do here is going to change the boot order to boot to our USB flash drive so we can boot up to that device. So let's go ahead and set this up. I'm just going to go here and go down to where it says advanced, then go over to where it says settings, and then boot, and then change boot option number 1 to my USB flash drive that has my Windows media on it. It can be your recovery drive that you created or any version of Windows, and we're going to boot to that right now. So hopefully we get display and we can boot up to that USB flash drive. We are now seeing no signal, which is good. So let that boot up to the next step. And once we get to the next step, hopefully we'll be able to repair our system. So let's go ahead and let that populate here, hopefully. It's a little bit slow. There we go. We got the little tiny animation there on the screen, and we can now see install Windows 10. So let's go ahead and click next here. And you should see an area on here called repair my computer. So I'm going to basically click on repair your computer here at the bottom left hand corner. Click on here, and I'll make a separate video on uninstalling drivers and stuff like that. But once you're inside here, we're going to go to troubleshoot, and what we're going to do next is go to our command prompt, because we need to put in a command prompt to get into our safe mode, because there's no option on this bootable media. So let's go into command prompt here. Now, if you do have a recovery disk, and you can see go into startup settings, then basically go in there and choose safe mode. So let me go ahead and type in this command. I'll show you here the command I'm going to do. Now, this is changing the BCD edit menu. So basically, I'm going to add this in so it always boots to safe mode, and I'll remove that at the very end of the video. So let me just quickly enter this command here so we can get into safe mode. So what you need to type here is BCD edit. Sorry for the camera flicker in there, but just BCD edit space / set, then space, and then these braces here. You can see that there. And then we need to put default, and then another brace here to close it off, then space. And then we want to put in here safe boot, and then space minimal if you want to boot to safe boot minimal. If you want to boot to safe boot with networking, then you need to take off minimal and put network, and this will give you safe boot with network activity, so you can download drivers and stuff like that. So just type networking if you want access to the internet. And then once we got this done, you can just push enter, and this will save it into our menu, and then basically that will boot to safe boot all the time. You will need to remove this, so bear that in mind, and you can remove that via the MS config. So on boot up, you can see here we do have a white LED light at the bottom of the LG logo on the monitor, and now we get a splash screen, and we're loading into safe mode.
So from safe mode now, you can literally remove the drivers for your GPU and reinstall them. You should have network connectivity through here, and you can then remove this driver and reinstall it. It's that simple. If you want to use DDU, you can do. If you want to see a video on how to do that, I can show you in another video. But for this one, I'm just keeping it short and sweet. So now you're in safe mode with networking, you can go ahead and uninstall your drivers. You can right click on the start button, go to device manager, and this will show you your device manager window where you will see your display drivers here, and you can remove these and reinstall them. So all you need to do is download DDU and basically uninstall this driver and reinstall it. Or you can go to the manufacturer's website, which will be AMD or Nvidia, and download the drivers from their website and literally install it from there. If you have another computer, you can always download the drivers on that computer there, put them on a USB flash drive, and then drop them straight onto your desktop and install them that way if you're having trouble getting internet activity, connectivity. It's that simple. Anyway, if you want to remove this now, because every time you reboot you'll go into safe mode when networking, all you need to do here is we're going to go down and right click here on the start button, go run, type msconfig in the bottom screen. You won't be able to see it there, just type msconfig. I'll put a big bit of writing on the screen so you can see it, and then basically go to the boot tab and remove the safe boot from your options. Click apply, OK, restart your PC, and hopefully once you've done all your driver update and reinstall, you should be able to then boot up to the desktop, and that's if you have a driver related issue that's causing a black screen of death. As you can see here, this will reboot, and hopefully this will now go to the desktop. As you can see here, let's see, we should see the splash screen, there we go, and that should now get to the desktop. And that is about it. That's basically how you can troubleshoot that issue. Very simple and easy to do. Anyway, if you follow those steps, you should find out whether your hardware has failed or whether it's a driver related issue, and you should be back up and running in no time at all. Anyway, I hope this one helps you out. My name has been Brian from briteccomputers.co.uk. Big shout out to all my YouTube members who have joined my YouTube members group. I do appreciate the support, and I shall see you again for another video real soon. Thanks again for watching. Bye for now.